Welcome to today's explainer. Right, let's just jump straight into this. Today we're unpacking a incredibly turbulent and transformative era in history. We're looking at how an unprecedented wave of invasions completely redrew the political boundaries of medieval India. It's like a giant puzzle being taken apart and put back together again, setting into motion changes that would literally ripple out for centuries. Now, to really ground ourselves in the sheer scale of what we're talking about, just take a look at this stunning aerial view of the Qutb Minar complex in Delhi. This towering architecture isn't just a beautiful monument. It's actually a physical anchor for the immense architectural, cultural, and political shifts we're about to explore. This structure was built by the very rulers who completely reshaped the subcontinent. And so that brings us to the core mystery we're unraveling today. How exactly did a series of invasions, originating from far beyond the towering Hindu Kush mountains, manage to completely redraw the map of the entire Indian subcontinent? It is a genuinely fascinating cause and effect narrative, full of ambition, power, and, quite frankly, drastic change. Section 1. A shifting political landscape. First things first, let's get our terminology straight. When we say medieval in this explainer, we're talking about India from the 11th to the 17th centuries. So we're not talking about the fall of the Roman Empire or the European Dark Ages here. Nope, this marks a totally unique era of profound transition, specifically within the subcontinent. So starting in the early 11th century, India faced this unprecedented spate of invasions. These invaders primarily came from beyond the Hindu Kush, mainly of Central Asian, Turkic, or Afghan descent. But you've got to ask, why did they come? Well, it was a highly potent and complex mix of motivations. They were drawn by tales of India's immense legendary riches, they harbored massive territorial ambitions, and, importantly, they were motivated to spread their religion, sometimes resorting to violent force to do so. Section 2. 5 Dynasties of Delhi. Following the defeat of King Prithviraj Chauhan back in 1192, a totally new political entity was born, the Delhi Sultanate. Over the next few centuries, Delhi saw the rapid and, honestly, incredibly chaotic succession of 5 distinct foreign dynasties. Just looking at the timeline, we have the Mamluks, also known as the Slave Dynasty, starting in 1206, followed by the Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, the Sayyids, and finally the Lodis in 1451. In all this rapid succession, it resulted in absolute geographic chaos. Just notice how violently the Sultanate's borders expanded and contracted when comparing the territories under the Tughlaqs versus the Lodhis. While they pushed incredibly hard into various regions, neighboring kingdoms like the Hoysalas down in the south and the Eastern Gangas over in the east actively resisted this advance. They remained thriving centers of power in their own right. Now, here's a statistic that absolutely blew my mind. 9. That is the average number of years a sultan actually managed to hold on to power. Less than a decade. Why so brief? Well, because the politics of the Delhi Sultanate were literally cutthroat. Almost 2 out of every 3 sultans seized power by violently eliminating their predecessor. Talk about a game of survival at the absolute highest stakes. Section 3. The Second Alexander. Take a close look at the incredible detail on this silver tanka coin. It was minted by Alauddin Khilji right at the turn of the 14th century. In the Persian inscription, he literally proclaims himself Sikandar Sani, which directly translates to the Second Alexander. That pretty much tells you everything you need to know about his ego and his frankly staggering territorial ambitions, doesn't it? Khilji's military success was definitely a double-edged sword. On one hand, he successfully defended India by repelling several massive invasions from the vast Mongol Empire. They were trying to swallow the subcontinent whole. But, on the other hand, to finance that enormous military apparatus of his, he sent his general, Malik Kafur, deep into the south. They ruthlessly plundered major Hindu centers like Madurai to bring massive wealth back up to Delhi. Section 4. Tughlaq's Ambitious Failures. A few decades after Khilji, Muhammad bin Tughlaq managed to unite most of the subcontinent under one ruler for the first time since the Mauryan Empire. Which sounds great, right? But his disastrous administrative experiments basically unraveled his own empire. Take the Daulatabad disaster, for example. Hoping for better central control, he decided to move his capital from Delhi all the way to Daulatabad. That's over 1,000 kilometers south. He forced the population of Delhi to make this agonizing migration. The logistics were, catastrophic, resulting in an immense loss of life. And then, years later, realizing the plan completely misfired, he simply abandoned it and forced everyone to march right back to Delhi. And if that wasn't enough, he also triggered what's known as the token currency crisis. Now, conceptually, it was a very modern, progressive economic idea, introducing cheap copper coins to act as tokens for high-value silver and gold. Honestly, it's kind of how our money works today. But the execution, terribly flawed. The citizens very quickly figured out how to easily counterfeit those copper coins. So suddenly, the market was flooded with fake money, which led to massive trade confusion and extreme economic decline. Section 5. The Cost of Conquest. Now, during this era, many sacred images and temples belonging to Buddhists, Jains, and Hindus were destroyed. To understand this objectively, we really need to look at a specific term, iconoclasm. This is essentially the rejection or destruction of icons or religious images considered idolatrous. The invaders' destruction of these sites was certainly motivated by a desire for the sheer wealth held inside them, but it was also heavily driven by this religious iconoclasm. And we can actually see how this concept literally built the physical architecture of the era. Look at these intricately carved pillars located in the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque in Delhi. Historical inscriptions actually state that materials from 27 destroyed Hindu and Jain temples were directly repurposed into the foundations and structures of this new Sultanate architecture. It's a pretty stark visual representation, isn't it? One culture quite literally being built upon the dismantled pieces of another. So the grim reality of the Delhi Sultanate was really a tale of two very different worlds. The sultans and the elite, they lived in extreme luxury. We're talking sprawling palaces, jeweled ornaments, fine foods, but this lifestyle was completely dependent on an incredibly unstable economy. It was funded by the violent plunder of military campaigns, by heavily taxing the common people, and by a vast growing slave trade where enslaved people were either forced into labor or sold off to Central Asia. Ultimately, this constant state of war and extraction deeply harmed everyday society, crippling local agricultural and trade networks. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and it leaves us with this final, massive question. How did this highly volatile blend of violent plunder, disastrously ambitious experiments, and completely new cultural influences ultimately set the stage for the modern Indian political map? The legacy of the Delhi Sultanate is practically written into the stones of India, and understanding it is absolutely crucial to understanding the subcontinent today. Thanks so much for exploring this complex history with me, and keep questioning the past.